Welcome to tonight's Maker Talk. Tonight we have two ASL interpreters. We have John Roberts and we have Hossein Miller. So thank you both for providing this. Let's see. And yeah, so now I'm going to introduce you to today's presenter. So this is Danny Green, and to quote her own website, she breaks things and puts them back together again. And she turns everything from broken glass headlights and lighters into art. She is entirely self-taught, and her work has appeared in galleries all over DC. So Danny, please take it away and tell us how you got started with mosaics.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here and basically go through my 10-year journey being a mosaic artist, which it all started back in 2012. And I created a presentation, which I'm going to share with you guys. Here we go. So I hope everyone can see that. So my goal with this presentation is to really inspire and motivate and hopefully share with you that a big goal or a journey really starts with just one step, and it's just multiple steps, one after the other, and that take you forward. And I'm going to start off at the very beginning. Where I got started is at Isaiah Zagar's Magic Gardens. This was about 30 minutes into the city from my hometown in Pennsylvania, and I went to visit back in 2012 when I was a senior in high school. And I saw this space courtyard and building covered in mirror and glass and found objects like tires, broken bottles, and ceramics. And I felt so inspired that when it came time to choose a capstone project in high school, I decided to make a mosaic. And this is me with my high school art teacher. She was actually my mentor on this project, and she really helped me bring this to life. And so my first mosaic was actually quite big, as you can see. It was probably about 4.5 feet or so. And I went to hardware stores and asked the hardware store professionals about how to make a mosaic. I looked on Google. I asked people that I knew who were artists in the area and came up with this, which is just tile and mirror and broken bottles on plywood. And then I went to college. So I graduated and I went off to AU in DC, studied film, and I joined a sorority. I studied abroad in Prague doing film there, and I worked as a barista and did some film on the campus, and really just like enjoyed college life. My goal at the time was to maybe do documentaries afterwards. But all the while, I was doing mosaics on the side during winter breaks, summer breaks, and whenever I could. But all the materials I was using were broken bottles, mirror, and things I could basically get my hands on. Nothing super complex. And then I graduated. So I actually was able to graduate early in December 2015. Due to my credits, and I decided to take that extra semester and intern at the Peace Corps Association, where I did some film, some graphic design, and also was working as a barista and just kind of figuring out what to do next and building a portfolio. And then I had the genius idea of, I want to make a documentary. That's my goal. That's my passion. And so I make the decision to go to France and try to find some local Black artists who I could interview and basically create this documentary on Black expats living in France, because there is a history of Black Americans going to France and being able to be more free to create artists in a more equal way. But then, you know, as time goes on, I run out of money and it's time to go home. So I actually moved back home to Pennsylvania and I'm looking for a job. I get a manager position at Forever 21 and an internship working for a local graphic designer. And during this time when I'm home, I actually make this piece. So making this presentation, I actually found it quite funny that this is the piece based on Icarus. I think there's a very clear connection there. I was having kind of a rough time, which is very common after college, where you're looking for a job, you're struggling to get one, you're feeling pretty disillusioned about your future. Maybe you have these big goals, you're gonna go off and make a documentary, but now you're back home. And I was struggling at the time. So I made this piece. You can see it's all broken bottles and mirror on actually a piece of plywood. And I eventually get a job. So I eventually get a job in 2016. And I moved back to DC and I move into a house of other artists or friends of mine, but they all happen to be artists. And I get really inspired just being around those people, and they actually invite me to show some mosaics in a show that they're going to put up in a cafe. And so I do. So I show some pieces. This is actually my first art show ever. And I put up some pieces at the Colony Club, which I think in DC has a different name now. But you can see that the work is still broken bottles, found objects, mirror, but I really find a lot of inspiration here, and there's so much energy being in an environment where there's so many artists talking about art in a really sophisticated, serious way. And from this point on, I kind of start thinking, okay, let me give a little bit more energy, time, money, investment, essentially, to mosaics. And I actually buy my first set of stained glass. And I buy a bunch of stained glass on Etsy, probably about $100 worth. I buy a real, you know, for fine art wood panel. And I create this piece right here. And this really opened up the whole world for me because I could use different colors. I wasn't using just blue, brown, and green and mirror. I was able to use red and orange and pink. And I wasn't cutting my fingers all the time and ending the piece feeling a little beat up. And I felt so inspired. And this was also during a time that at my job, I was feeling that routine. You know, you go to work, you come home, you go to work, you come home. Friday hits, you go out, and then you meal prep, and then you go back. And so I was really looking for a hobby. So in very Danny fashion, I decide to make a challenge. And I challenged myself to make 30 mosaics in 3 months. And I'm actually inspired to do this by the 100-Day Project, which was kind of popular on social media, which was a project where you make 100 mosaics in 100 days, or you make 100 projects in 100 days. And I knew that for mosaics, I couldn't do that, you know, so I decided to do a kind of modified version of that. So I would do 30 mosaics in 3 months. So I bought 30 wood panels that are 6 inches by 6 inches, a bunch of stained glass, mostly from Etsy, and set out on this challenge of making them as fast as I could and just getting out all these ideas that had popped up when I had first started using stained glass. And this was also just around the time that I started getting my Instagram account going. I made a separate Instagram and was posting these mosaics on there, and I was able to meet other mosaic artists. They started to comment on my stuff, I commented on their stuff, and for me, Instagram became a positive place because not only did I not share this mosaic Instagram with a lot of people, but I also was able to just find people who are very similar to me and meet mosaic artists for the first time ever. And about halfway through this journey where I'm growing and I'm experimenting and trying new ideas, I decide to go big again. I'm like, it's time to go big. I'm done making the small pieces. And I go to Home Depot and I get a big wood board, which is probably around 3.5 feet by 2 feet. And I remember sitting in my apartment in Silver Spring, looking at the wood panel and seeing the beauty of the wood grain pieces and really feeling like the piece that I was making the art on itself was beautiful. So I make this piece. This is called Current. And this piece, I really say, is a big pivot point for me because this was a piece where I really felt like I want to do this serious. You know, this piece was very spiritual for me because I felt like I was being guided. I felt very connected to, you know, something bigger than myself. And I really felt like maybe I want to do this more seriously, you know? So I really think of this as a moment where I started to get serious about art. And after this, I started making a couple more big pieces in between making small little sketches. I call them mosaic sketches. And actually, side note, if you type in hashtag mosaic sketch into Instagram, I think a lot of my old pieces may come up. Some of them, at least. I've archived a few. But so these are the big pieces I start making, which you can see are very derivative of the piece before this. And they're kind of following the wood grain abstractly. And then you can see here that I'm starting to get more detailed, have a bit more control over my work. And I'm really starting to get more serious about my medium. So I'm making work and I actually start to sell work. Someone actually asked me through Instagram, you know, how much is a piece? And I think to myself, how much is a piece? And I come up with a price and they accept, they buy it, and I start selling things. I start actually advertising, hey, this is for sale. And it feels really inspiring. I'm growing, but I realize I'm also spending a lot of money, right, on a lot of my materials. So I actually decide that I need to expand. You know, my plant, which is my art journey, is getting big and it's time to repot. So I start looking for a studio. I really want an art studio. I don't want to be working in my apartment, basically my bedroom. And I'm looking for a studio and I keep falling back to 52 O Street, which is a studio space in Northwest DC. And I keep coming back to it. I go to other places, but it's too expensive. And eventually I just feel called to this certain space at 52 O Street, knowing full well that I don't necessarily have a way to pay for it. I'm scared. I have a little bit of savings. But I remind myself that the landlord at 52 O Street did say that I give him 30 days notice and I can peace out. So I sign my name on the dotted line and I sign this lease and I am on the books for 52 O Street and I get my first studio space. So it's a big space for my first space, which is part of the reason I could not afford it. It was very, very inspirational to me, though, because I was able to meet local artists. For the first time, I was able to interact with people in person, not just online, that were very serious about art. And I start going to art shows and I start selling more pieces and doing some commissions. And I actually start to have events and host different events and participate in art shows, which is really exciting. And then the biggest turning point for me was when I actually started teaching. I taught with Lemon Collective. People have been telling me for a while up until this point, which was about 2018, late 2018, that I need to teach. They're like, you should teach, you should reach out to the Lemon Collective, which unfortunately does not exist anymore. But I reach out to the Lemon Collective, they accept, I start teaching there, and I start teaching at Femme Fatale. I do the occasional company that wants to do a retreat. And that's where I'm able to start paying for the studio. These classes really helped solidify that. And that was just like so exciting to me because finally I didn't have to be worried or like just burning savings. So I'm hosting these events and I'm making art. I'm able to make work that's bigger and that more exciting. And then the pandemic hits. Unfortunately, as we all know, March 2020 hit us all pretty hard. And I got really scared, I think like a lot of us, and kind of disillusioned with what I was focusing on so heavily and running full force at, which was art. And I just felt like I needed a break. I wasn't liking the work I was making at the time. I wasn't able to go to the studio as much because I was kind of nervous about going on public transit and, you know, leaving the house on a daily basis. So I move out of 52 O Street and I decide to move into one apartment studio away from my roommates and be able to work and live in the same space. And that brings you to the photo, which is on the right side, I believe, for everyone. And I just am making work in my studio. And slowly, as time goes on, I'm able to kind of lift myself up out of the sadness and start making art, pouring myself into art. And this really brings me to my chakra series, which is getting more serious and getting more spiritual. And I show work at Home, which is a gallery at 52 O Street, back where I was, who was a friend of mine at the time. And you can see here I have root chakra, and I also have sacral chakra. So this is kind of the point where I start really picking up sales. I transitioned from teaching in person to teaching virtually. And I think my work starts getting very detailed because I'm able to really spend that time, roll out of bed, you know, and focus on my art. And I make the decision, which is real risky, you know, and joining the Great Resignation and quitting my job, which was big. This happened in 2021, so pretty recent. And I made that decision knowing that I had been able to save some money up, which is very fortunate given the circumstances. And I was getting more serious and I was able to sell work and get commissions. And again, just like when I got the studio, I felt called to do it. You know, I mean, I think there are points where you have to plan, and then there's points where you have to jump. And this was the jumping period. And I moved back to 52 O Street, which I'm very excited about. And you can see I take over the studio that Emin had, which is another artist in DC. And I'm making commissions that are outdoors. I'm having art shows. Right now, I actually set up my show at the Strathmore, which is opening on Thursday at 7 p.m. if anyone would like to come. And we're basically at the present. And I just want to wrap up this story with saying that my reason for really speaking about this journey is that I know that when I was asked to do the Maker Talk, a lot of it is talking about how to make mosaics, which I'm more than happy to talk about. I loved teaching, but I feel like a lot of what stops people from making is the fear of making and the fear of seeing work that is so inspiring, like I saw Isaiah Zagar's Magic Gardens, and feeling intimidated, feeling like I can't do that. And I was hoping that through seeing my journey, you can see that this all happened over 10 years, and it just was step after step. And there was a lot of stumbling along the way. And I really think that, if you really want to make something, I say you go out and make it, and you don't have to share it or make it for sale if you don't want to. I think part of the reason that my art was able to get to where it was is that in the beginning, I really kept it incubated by creating this Instagram that I didn't share with people, that just existed. And I only kind of was able to connect semi-anonymously with just other people online who were also artists. So I want to open it up to questions. I hope I didn't talk too fast, but I'm going to move it back over.
So I actually have some questions for you already. When you were talking about making your very first mosaics, and then being able to buy a different kind of glass, you said that you felt less beat up after making a mosaic. So could you talk about the different kinds of glass and what they do? And
Totally.
I guess.
I mean, at first, I think a big reason was financially, but also because I didn't really know how to make a mosaic, and I was just really going off of the magic gardens that I saw. I really was just using objects that I could get my hands on. So going to the tile store, going to IKEA to get mirror, and begging my mom to buy glass bottles that I could break. Lots of Perrier bottles were broken. And people ask me all the time, do you get cut? And the answer is yes, quite often. But when I started using stained glass, which is actually made to be broken, when you break it, it doesn't shatter, like would happen if you accidentally dropped, a wine glass or something. So fortunately, my hands were a bit saved by that. And I think that made me feel like, because I remember even writing in my journal once, oh, I don't think I can be a mosaic artist because my hands hurt too much after I made so that helped that.
Question from Lynn. What has been the most rewarding part of your journey, and what has been the most challenging?
Oh man, that is a challenging question. I feel like the most rewarding part of my journey was definitely when I feel like people are getting what I'm trying to convey. Like with every piece I make, I'm trying to convey a sense of wonder and awe, because to me, I feel like that is the essence of a positive meditative space and that positive mental break, pause, you may say. And so when I feel that someone has gotten that, it makes me feel really happy. And I think the most negative probably moment for me is the moments where you kind of doubt yourself. I think the moments when you feel like maybe I've taken a wrong turn, like this was a mistake. And at the end, I always feel grateful for moments like that. But in the moment you're like, oh man, what did I get myself into?
Yeah. Another question about glass. How do you choose your glass? And if you're doing something upcycled, like how do you choose one bottle from another? Like you mentioned Perrier earlier, why Perrier?
Well, I guess there's a more technical answer than a more like personal aesthetic. On a technical perspective, I mean, because I'm using stained glass in a way that where I'm putting it flat on a board, I am trying to make sure that the colors are bright enough that they're not going to become super dark, because they're not like stained glass, which is going to have light just going through it. I do sometimes when I'm in the glass store, which I usually go to glass stores to buy glass now, I just lay it down on the, table or whatever, just to see what the color would look like. So that's the more technical side. And aesthetically, I think I just really am attracted to colors that, at least originally, that just felt very nostalgic. For some reason, that royal blue color is very nostalgic to me. I don't know, I'm a 90s baby, so I'm not sure. But also I love sparkles. Iridescence is the best, you
Who
know.
among us does not love sparkles?
I'm like a crow, you know.
Question from Madeline. How did you manage to balance work and art before making the jump into full-time art making?
Oh, okay. Great question. I mean, in the beginning, it felt like, okay, not to be, you know, too archaic sounding, but I felt like it was kind of my naughty secret, you know, it was just a thing that I didn't tell people about that I did on the side that was like super important to me. And then eventually, and so it was just something that I really just came home and was like an escape. In the beginning, I feel like it was effort, and I would just find time that was sacred, which usually ended up being before work, right? No one can really interrupt that time, you know.
Yeah.
But then at a certain point, I'm just going to be honest, the balance was not good. I mean, I mean, it was leaning heavily to art. And I actually, when I got my second job, which I guess I didn't mention, I got a second job. I looked purposely for a job where I could focus more on art. So a lot of the people I worked with had kids, they had families to get home to, so they were not trying to stay late or anything. So I would just leave work and go straight into that. So I recommend people who have a side thing is, you know, if it's too hard to balance, it might be a good idea to find a job that is easier to
That's more
balance.
flexible. Yeah.
I know it's hard to.
Yeah. What do you see for your future with your mosaics?
Oh, well, I definitely want to make more public mosaics. That's really what got me motivated. So I want to definitely do that. And right now I'm just kind of like running fast and hard, you know, I'm trying to keep moving. And I'm really excited about it. Yay.
We have another technical question about, I'm not exactly sure what it's called, but the grout, the stuff that is not the glass in your mosaics.
Okay.
Some of it looked like it was different colors. Is it definitely called grout, and does it come in like black and white and orange, or
Oh, and yeah. So I use grout every time. You don't have to, but I prefer it. And I do think it helps the strength of your mosaic. I usually just use black and white now, but I was experimenting with different colors using blue or green. I usually take either white and dye it. Sometimes I take black, but usually I take white and dye it with just acrylic paint. But you can definitely buy grout that's already tinted, but it's usually very expensive and you don't even get a lot.
yeah.
Don't do that.
If somebody is looking to make a mosaic for the very first time, what would you ask them or recommend?
So, you know, just to plug myself, I mean, I do have a YouTube, which I could share, that goes through the process, but there's also tons of just YouTube videos about how to make one. But the essence of it is really just choosing a substrate. I very often use wood because I like that, but of course that's only for indoors. Weedy board is what I use for the one piece I showed that I did recently that was outdoors, which that is sometimes behind showers. You can order that online. It's WEDI board, Weedy board. And then you just choose your tessera, which is what you call whatever you're gonna put on the substrate. I use stained glass typically that I cut with nippers or hammer, you know. You can use a lot of tile, whatever. I use Wellbond for my adhesive, which is white, but it dries clear. It looks like Elmer's glue, but it's a lot stronger. But thin set is what you would use for outdoors. And then, yeah, I wait 24 hours after I've glued everything on, and then I grout it, and then you just wipe it off after.
We have a Q&A question. What currently inspires your art?
Oh, so most recently, I just for the Strathmore show, which opens on Thursday, I'm very excited about it. I recently was working on Blue and White, which I was really inspired by spirit and really thinking about. I reduced the color palette on purpose because I wanted to focus on the details, right? Because I think spiritually and just as a life motto, like it's about the little pieces and the bit by bit that kind of make up the whole. And I think by making it monochromatic, you're able to really focus on the details and the small differences, and you really lean into the piece. And that's the current inspiration. And I'm definitely very material based. So the material and the idea are one, and I'm always trying to create a sense of chance and choice, right? Randomness and conscious decision.
Do you ever do workshops in other states than, I guess,
Oh.
the DMV? Since I think you,
Right. I'm in
yeah.
No, I don't, but I have done them virtually. Like through the past 2 years, I only did them virtually and I sent them out. So I definitely had people who were far away that did them. It's semi-limiting, but I feel like, if you're really, really interested, of course, you can always add on to what I send you.
Okay.
I don't have any planned right now. Sorry.
It's okay. Do you have any other words for people that are just getting started making art?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I'll end out with is that, if you're really interested in making art, then you should just do it. I mean, I feel like part of my mission as a artist and a mosaic artist specifically is to really encourage people to think beyond just the traditional mediums, and that, really anything can be art. I actually talked to someone recently, Saturday, who was telling me about how every holiday he actually he finds styrofoam and cuts it and paints it and creates these like 3D doors, and how he goes to stores, local smoke shops, just to be frank, and he's able to get glass that they broken, right? And then he transforms that into a sculpture. And it just goes to show you that he's not spending a ton of money. He's finding things that are being thrown out, like the styrofoam, and he is just able to create these really abstract forms. So I think, don't be afraid that if you have an idea that seems insane, to just go for it. And also just, you don't have to show anyone if you don't want to. Don't feel the pressure.
That actually brings us to another question that we have, which is, what is the most unusual thing you have made into a mosaic?
Oh man, I don't know. I mean, I think the coolest thing I made ever still was back in high school. And I really think it got me going. Like, we had to take apart, he said, go buy a piece of technology, bring it in. I found a VCR at a thrift store and I took it apart and I made it into a shoe. I made it into like something that looked like a Converse shoe.
You turned a VHS player into a shoe.
Yeah.
Wild.
I mean, I took it apart and looked at it and was like, oh, these pieces kind of look like a shoe. And he just said, turn it into something else.
Well, thank you all for coming and watching us talk, and for asking so many cool questions. Just to give you an update on the Maker Talks for next month, there actually is not going to be a Maker Talk next month in April. We're going to be having a very different event that's called a Fix-It DC Clinic, which is a little ironic considering the topic of this Maker Talk, because just like Danny, Fix It DC is about putting things back together that have come apart. And then finally, I have to plug our class sign up link and the lab's newsletter. If you really liked this event and you want to attend future events, or if you want to keep tabs on when the next Maker Talk will be, the class signups link is where you can sign up for all of our current stuff. Right now, we're slowly bringing back machine reservations. So now you can reserve things like the 3D printers or our memory lab where you can digitize old media like VHS. We can't really help you turn them into shoes, but we can help you go and turn your old VHS into a current file. And yeah, and thank you all so much for coming to this talk. And thank you, Danny, for doing such a great talk on mosaics for us today.